Red light, green light, red light, green light, red light, green light, red light, green light, red light.
Folks, I'm a Scotsman, and I always say glory, glory to the pint. But we're saying something else today. We're saying glory, glory to our guests here today, Leon Brando. Welcome to the Soul Sessions, my friend.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. This is the first podcast I've actually done since becoming a proper professional wrestler, you want to call it. So yeah, very excited to get going today.
Oh wow, you're blessing me with the honor, man. And I dress for the occasion as I always do. So
yeah, I've dressed for the occasion. I've worn my t-shirt, so that's me. Just gotta get the merch out.
We could have gone topless, but YouTube would have demonetized us to the high heavens. But we can't have that because I do want to have these episodes up and not take it down because I like my work. I like what I present. But of course, it's about you, Leon. So as we say on this show, every guest has a story and every story has a beginning. Leon, how did your story begin as a wrestling fan?
So I'm a bit of an old head. I'm actually in my early 30s. So I grew up with the Attitude Era, as did a lot of guys, really. The earliest memory I have of pro wrestling actually is going to one of my dad's friend's house and seeing The Rock cut the promo for Armageddon 2000. Obviously, you probably know it, where he's talking to all of the guys, and I just thought it was just so charismatic, and I just thought it was just so crazy in terms of the type of content that I was seeing out there. It was just so different to a lot of the other kids stuff I grew up with. Like, I grew up being a massive fan of like Power Rangers and all of the other stuff, like Yu-Gi-Oh, Dragon Ball Z, all of that stuff. And then that kind of seemed like this live action anime. It seemed like this live action, like, I don't really know how to put it. Just like that morality battle, really, but also with the attitude of the Attitude Era, really. And then I think just kind of going down that, just kind of watching the guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin, like The Rock, and then just these larger than life personalities and just doing the stuff they did. I went to quite a few like indie shows around that time, but I think the indie shows around that time, you'll probably know this as well, a lot of like tribute shows, which are very, very funny to look back on. They still do a few nowadays where it's like, tributes to the WWF. And I remember my dad's always worked in entertainment, actually, so he knew a friend who knew a friend, and we ended up going backstage at this indie show, which is a tribute show. I remember seeing the guy who played Kane take his mask off and being like, oh wow, okay, this is weird. And then just kind of it all kind of spiraled from there, really. So I've been a fan for a very long time, and then I think I just probably made the leap quite late in 2019 into starting being a wrestler when I was still based up in Manchester, and then yeah, it's been kind of rolling ever since. Obviously there was a break in COVID, but yeah, it's been fun games ever since, really.
Hey, fair dues to you. You're getting all the backstage secrets as a child. I bet Meltzer would have loved to have had you in, like, give me all the information. What's going on? Who's doing what's going on? He can't get all the information. He gets his Tokyo Dome information, and that's what he can get.
Yeah. He's not interested in Dave down the pub who's being Kane for the weekend, but I am. I think it's great, but
I don't know. Big Dave, he's got a lot of good stories, and he also puts a lot of money in the puggy. So I mean, he seems like a good guy in my books. I'll take that. But you also mentioned the Attitude Era, and the Attitude Era is synonymous with the 90s. And there's other media that's synonymous with the 90s. You mentioned anime like Dragon Ball Z, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon starting up there, music-wise, Nirvana, and there's so many things that culminate with the 90s. For yourself, how important do you think wrestling is to the identity of the 90s?
Absolutely, massively. It was all a big counterculture thing. Obviously, it goes without saying what Stone Cold Steve Austin represented in the storyline with Vince McMahon. It's big counterculture, it's big anti-corporate culture, and I think that's something that I've always vibed with, is this big kind of like, it's, this is kind of why I got into wrestling, really. It's a big like small man against big man thing. It's I came from a poor background, and this is how I'm going to get rich. This is how I'm going to get up on the big man. This is how I'm going to get up on the companies, and everything that I've played, everything that I've watched, everything that I've kind of vibed with has kind of been that. So Stone Cold Steve Austin, to me as a poor kid, I was like, oh my God, this is great. This is someone that's, taken himself out of a poor background, gone on to a big stage, and then become a celebrity, become rich, and become someone that other people can look to in terms of like being an icon of success, really. And I think that's what I always kind of envisage wrestling to be, just both as like in and out of storyline, where like Stone Cold Steve Austin is that within storyline. He is that redneck that became, a world champion. But outside of storyline as well, he is also a redneck that became world champion. That is the two in the same thing. And I think that's the thing that comes with wrestling, is there's that element of reality to it, and there's that element of fiction to it, and it's where the lines blur. And I think that's where fans get really excited, and that's where I got really excited. I think as I got a bit older and got into the CM Punk era and the Ring of Honor era, where it was this kind of like, oh my God, this is so real. And that's what I've always liked about wrestling. It's this hyper real thing where it's more than just fiction because of how it bleeds into non-fiction essentially. And to answer your question, that is such a big part of the 90s because I think it was just so and imbued with that attitude, like you say, the grunge and just everything that came with it. It was a part of the culture. It was that kind of violent counterculture essentially.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, as well, I think in our modern era, you think of Stone Cold from the 90s. The 2000s was kind of like how Eddie Guerrero went against the culture with Brock Lesnar for his feud and mentioning his personality and his past demons, and even a bit obviously with Punk in the later ones, and obviously Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson, and even this modern era sort of with Cody Rhodes going against The Rock and him choosing John Cena as his champion. Do you think, obviously, with wrestling, it will always be that the little man punching up against the big man mentality with its stories and presentation?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think the last we probably saw of that type of like the company being behind the champion was the 80s. It was Hulk Hogan. It was those types of guys where it was like this guy is the product. This guy is the guy you should be cheering. And I think in the modern day and age, fans start to turn against that. Even now with Cody Rhodes, where he was on the up, he was the challenger, he was the underdog. But then as soon as he won that title, people do start to turn against him. And I do think that people are just more natural to root for that underdog, and I think that is such an important part of pro wrestling, and I think such an important part of storytelling in general is when that guy, the baby face, the good guy has finally got to the top, they finally won the thing. What do you do with them next? And I think it's about tackling that right, and I do think that there's interesting ways of doing that. I think AEW has done quite a good job with some of their baby faces, like Hangman Page especially. I love the work they've been doing with him, Swerve Strickland, where they're adding edges to these heroes. They're adding little gritty bits where it's like they're not necessarily perfect people, and I think if there's not like an underdog element to them, then I think that's what people like seeing in their heroes as well now, where it's like, okay, you're not a perfect bastion of good, that you've got flaws there, you've got things there which shouldn't necessarily be there if you were a perfect person, but people like seeing that because obviously everyone's flawed. They don't like seeing someone that's just completely white meat as much anyway, on a big scale at least.
No, we're not all perfect. My liver can't handle all the alcohol in the world because I wish it did, but sadly, I'm not built like that. I'm built different, not in the best way though. Yeah. But you mentioned obviously Hangman and Swerve, and I think your point there is very interesting because if you think about it, Hangman, lovable, the cowboy, the anxious cowboy, but he also burnt down somebody's house. I mean, Swerve, he's also curb stomped people into cinder blocks. He's done some ruthless things as well. I think about it in the WWE. Cody Rhodes really comes to mind of how he, mercilessly just threw Kevin Owens through a ladder.
Yes.
Do you think AEW, in their way, with their baby faces especially, are the most human?
I think at the moment, possibly. I think that it's always going to be dependent on the story. I think in the past, WWE have done a very good job of it. You mentioned Eddie Guerrero earlier, and I think that's someone that the fans have always really got behind because he's not been perfect. He had a lot of, substance abuse issues that he came to the forefront with and was very honest about, and people loved him more for it. And I think that's more what people like to see now. And I think like with Cody Rhodes, as you mentioned, when he did the Alabama Slam to Kevin Owens, I think people saw that and they like seeing baby faces do actions that are justified because it's like, that was violent. That was a bit aggressive, but he deserved it. So I think there's that kind of like, that feeling they get to feel from it, where they feel that justification for it and it is good. So I think the more that you can do things like that, where there's like a blurring of the lines. And if you look at fiction in general, if you look at something like Game of Thrones, you look at something like Breaking Bad, a lot of this prestige TV that I know WWE is especially leaning into now, none of these guys are black and white heroes. And I think that is what people like to see now. People are a lot smarter when it comes to TV and with the way that WWE is on Netflix now. I think that's a lot more they can do with it. And I think it even goes all the way back to like, Stone Cold Steve Austin, again, to go back to him. Obviously, he was not a black and white hero. He did a lot of stuff that traditionally would have been a heel. So I think it's about the right guy doing the right thing, but also kind of like, making sure that someone's not purely white meat in the right circumstance anyway.
I think especially it does speak to our current media landscape as well, because obviously one big popular show that a lot of people link to wrestling with characters is Amazon's Prime series, The Boys.
Yes, yeah.
Which is a fantastic series. Obviously, it was a comic book by Eric Kripke, done here in Scotland as well, I believe, which is, hey, our rise to fame of just creating utter filth and degenerates, as we do. But obviously, in The Boys, obviously, there's people like Butcher, who is necessarily a bad man doing bad things, but yet is still such a beloved character. And obviously, that is through the performance done by Carl Urban. And obviously, there is Tony Anthony's portrayal of Homelander, who is just an evil son of a bitch, but people admire that character. It's fascinating, do you think, with obviously these modern portrayal of characters that are just bad people, yet so loved by a fan base that is so prominent?
Yeah, I think it's just, I think a lot of it is fulfillment, wish fulfillment. Obviously, you get the characters all the way, again, back in the 80s and 90s, like the Punisher, who was someone that was very much the opposite of Captain America, who was the opposite of Spider-Man. He was someone that, like, you know, had something very bad happen to him, and he used it as justification to do bad things to those bad people. And I think, like, you can look at that and go, like, oh, that's horrible, really. And, you know, is this someone that kids should look up to? But I think wrestling fans, as they get older, want heroes like that. And I think it goes in cycles. And this is something that we talk about in wrestling a lot, is we'll bring in a lot of new fans at a young age. They'll reach a certain age and they'll either stick with it or they'll bring in their own kids to it. So I feel like the audience ages and the product ages, and then all of a sudden it'll just kind of, there'll be a soft reset and it'll come back around. So I think what we're seeing now at the moment, at least in my estimation, is this kind of rise in the maturity of the product. And then all of a sudden it might be that one day it's like, actually, we want to go back a little bit and then come back around, because we kind of had that with the Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression Era, when it started to come down. There was PG Era, and it started to kind of come down with the tastes of the audience. And then all of a sudden it was like, actually, we're on Netflix now, there's social media, we can start doing more adult things, more mature things. And then it might eventually come back around again, depending on, you know, factors like sponsors, or again, just the audience getting into it at a young age again. So it's really interesting, like you say, kind of seeing those things like The Boys. And I love The Boys as well. I absolutely love Butcher. He's someone that I look at in terms of just presentation and the way that he comes across and the way that he's charismatic. I think Carl Urban's fantastic. And I try, and when I'm doing character bits and when I'm trying doing characterization, look at TV and look at where people aren't necessarily looking, because I think that's something that I've been told a lot as well, is like, so many wrestlers will just take inspiration from wrestling. I try and take it from anything, but just because I think it just, like, it enriches you as a person and a character, essentially.
Yeah, no, especially I think you can learn from many avenues. You may be passionate about one medium, but there's so many others you can learn from that benefit that one medium. You know, I think of great characters like Tom Ellis's portrayal of Lucifer in the TV show Lucifer. I think of obviously Jesse Pinkman as, you know, the jet actor who plays Jesse Pinkman, because it's blanked my mind because it's been so long since I've watched that series. Aaron Paul, why does it come to me at that moment? I guess it does. But there are so many of that avenue of characters that can be so great for portrayal. Obviously, we've touched upon Butcher, but there's obviously Homelander, and a lot of people want Cody Rhodes to become Homelander. There's been teases of it through the partnership advertisement that WWE did with The Boys. His AW attire was very Homelander-esque. Do you think Cody Rhodes being not obviously full Homelander, because we do have advertisers to appeal to, but do you think it is the logical route for Cody Rhodes' character to become a Homelander-esque type?
I think there's a difference between logical route and difference between what's best for the company and best for WWE and best for wrestling. And I think this is something that fans don't necessarily think about. And again, I don't want to, like, obviously I don't work for WWE. You know, I don't want to say my insight, and I don't have any insight, but I guess, like, if I was going to take a backseat and look at it from a purely business perspective, I would look at it and say, okay, is it, you know, and again, when you look at it in the past, like when they turned Stone Cold Steve Austin heel, it was a very, very bad business decision. And what I'm trying to get at essentially is turning Cody Rhodes heel a good business decision. Whereas recently they found that it's a bit more the opposite, where in the past turning their top babyface heel wasn't necessarily a good business decision. They turned Roman Reigns heel and it was very, very good for them. Like, he's now a better character, he earns more money for them, and now he's come back to being babyface while still being the same character. So I think there's a lot more blurring of the lines there. And it's one of those things as well, like with John Cena and what he's done recently. If they turn him heel, will he still get the babyface reactions anyway? Because then it's an interesting thing. So there's this hyper real thing where people are booing the storyline and booing what they think of it, when in reality they like the character, or they like the person portraying the character, but not the wrestler themselves. So there's all of these blurred lines where like people are cheering John Cena's heel acts because they enjoy it, whereas in what they should be doing really is they should be being the participants in it. They should be playing their act as the audience and booing him because he's the heel. So it's really interesting to kind of think about. So as a story, possibly, I think maybe that would be very interesting. But also, is it too predictable? Is there something else you could do there? I would like to see, I guess, if I was to, play armchair booker for a bit, I would like to see to be an element of that. I feel like the really obvious thing to do is do the Homelander thing, but I also kind of shy away from wrestling characters and wrestling gimmicks, which are just, it is exactly this thing from this TV show or movie. Because I think we've had a lot of that in the past, but although it's been done well, I think people are so much more aware of media now, because I think in the past when you had Razor Ramon being Scarface, for example, people hadn't necessarily seen it or known the reference. Well, Vince McMahon definitely didn't anyway, because he was like, yeah, go ahead and do it. I had no idea what this is. This is great. Whereas now I think people would be like, oh, I've seen The Boys. I know this is Homelander. I know exactly how this is going to go. So I think it would almost be more interesting if we subverted the trope, but in an interesting way is the way I would do it. So kind of give them a little bit of it, but then also kind of go, actually, this is more interesting and this is the way that we're going to go with it.
Of course, absolutely. And I think as well, since I've done the show and got to work for wrestling shows and understand wrestling's mindset from a wrestler's point of view, I analyze the things differently, because people are saying, well, Cody Rhodes should turn heel. And it's like, okay, just because you're bored of the story or maybe bored of the wrestler, but are you looking at how many merchandise tickets he's selling, how many people, like kids, are looking up to him and buying, like when they came here for Clash of the Castle Scotland, they were selling 150-pound weight belts signed by Cody. And I saw kids using them to beat each other up. And I'm like, that I've paid for worse things. Trust me, my bank account does tell me. But I see that is a business point of view that you don't want to butcher that. You have such a great income coming in from this one talent. For yourself, do you feel like becoming a wrestler and understanding the business changes your mindset about things, about presentation, the styles of the products?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I came into wrestling, I had an idea of what I wanted wrestling to be and what I want is myself to be as a wrestler, really. And I think it really took until I started at New Wave in 2022 to really understand from the guys who had worked at WWE and from the guys that really, really knew the business, like Wild Boar, like Brendan White, like Danny Jones, like lots of other people I could sit here and mention, like to really understand actually this is the way it works and this is the way it really, really should be done, where it's changed completely, because there's so much that gets involved with wrestling behind the scenes that you'll know about that isn't just as simple as we want to book this guy to be the champ and then that's because he's the most popular guy and he has the best matches. There's a lot more to it than that. Obviously, just go to a workplace if you've ever worked, anywhere really. Politics is politics. That someone might not get the promotion because of not necessarily that they're not the best person for the job, but there's a lot more to it than that. It might be that they're not dependable, they're not reliable, they're not someone that you could trust to speak in public. A lot of different things which also come up in wrestling, really. And I think it kind of it's a lot of things that fans aren't necessarily aware of, but that does change how wrestling is put together, really.
Absolutely. I mean, wrestling fans are going to be wrestling fans. My company's better than your company and all this and that. When actually all the wrestlers are friends behind you. We're going for dinner parties afterwards. Why is it, do you think, there is such a this and them mentality between wrestling fans? Is it just that, their products are so different and they just want to fight each other, or what is it?
I think humans are just inherently tribalistic, to go a bit theological, to go a bit philosophical for a little bit. Humans are just tribalistic. People will fight over anything and everything. There is an element of the companies pitting each other against each other because it's good for business. When people get tribalistic, they will support one more than the other. I'm obviously a wrestler and a wrestling fan. I like all wrestling companies. I think there's two things to it. I think that people, like I said, they like to support one thing over another because it's almost like a sports thing. They like feeling like they're a part of a team. They like feeling like they're included. We are tribalistic as a human species. So obviously we want to kind of band together and feel like we're together under the same mindset. But it's also, I think people don't look at wrestling like it's an actual art form. They look at it as if it's just one thing. Whereas wrestling isn't the genre. wrestling is the art form, and underneath wrestling there's a lot of different genres, and they don't really think about the fact that, like, say for example, I can watch one style of wrestling, like I don't know, like lucha, and I might be like, actually this isn't for me, but I still have a lot of respect for it. I still understand the history behind it, and I still understand why people do like it. And I think people are very kind of resistant to do that with like AEW or WWE, where I can look at some parts of either and be like, actually that isn't for me, but I appreciate who that is for. And you know, again, and I get that as a fan, you want everything to be for you, but I think you also need to step back and be like, actually, I'm a big fan of Britney Spears, so the Slipknot album isn't for me. You know, some wrestling Slipknot, some wrestling is Britney Spears, and you just got to know which is which and which is for you. And like, I think there being more wrestling companies out there is good for everyone. Having more opportunities for people to work, having more opportunities for people to earn a full-time living is good for wrestling. And if you're not behind that, then, you know, have a think about what you want from wrestling, really.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've always described it as a pick and mix. You can put in whatever you want in your bag and enjoy that little treat, and leave the stuff you want behind. They're an odd bunch, internet wrestling fans in particular. They'll watch a product and then just watch it to hate it or criticize it over. Like, you're meant to be a fan and enjoy the product. Like, don't go over critical about it. Like, just at the end of the day, it's a form of entertainment to enjoy. You can be like, oh, I don't like this and that. This could be better, and that's fine. But when you overstep it and go, that's your whole personality of just criticizing and degrading something because it's either it's not what you like or you think it should be done the way that you think it is. It's like, calm down. The stairs to your mother's basement are right there. You can get up and enjoy some vitamin D from the sun. Even like, you know, we're recently Mariah May leaving AEW to go in to NXT. A lot of people obviously like, congratulations for her for getting her dream. That was her dream goal, to obviously become a WWE superstar. Then there are some people that are like, you know, oh, she's betrayed AEW, or Tony Khan's fumbled because he didn't sign her for a longer deal. But it's like, people have their own personal goals. I mean, just your thoughts on that, man.
I think it's literally that. I think people need to mind their own business. It might be that she's always wanted to be in WWE because she's always been a fan of WWE. Maybe AEW isn't for her. Maybe she wants to use it as a vehicle into showbiz. Maybe she, you know, there's a lot of things that go into it. I don't know Mariah, obviously. I say obviously, but some people do, because she is obviously from the UK. But I think that people just kind of need to, again, mind their own business. There's been a lot of things. There was one recently with one of the AEW guys where he was just literally off TV. It was Wardlow, he was off TV because he was filming a TV show. And people were saying like, oh, Tony Khan's fumbled and all of this. And I'm like, no, there's a lot more that goes through it than that. You know, give guys the benefit of the doubt. You know, I think that also it's very, very hard to run a wrestling company with so many people in it. AEW is still a very young company, not to be the ardent AEW defender or anything, but, you know, it's still, you've got to juggle a lot of plates. You know, people have to come in and out of cycles, really. People can't always be on top. People can't always be coming and going. People need to be coming and going, really. And I think with the whole thing where people are blaming Tony Khan for this and blaming Triple H for this, again, it's kind of like I think people are looking at wrestling too much like it's like soccer, like it's like football, where it's like, oh, the manager's fault, it's this, you know. There's a lot more to it than that. And I think people need to be kind of just enjoying it for what it is, and kind of stepping back from it a little bit, and just spending less time surrounded by people with negative thoughts, with people who just always want to dog on it. Because, you know, there are people, like you say, on the likes of Twitter and whatever, who will always just want to dog on wrestling because it's easy. You know, dogging on sports is easy, but sports will always kind of go on because it's, you know, it's a thing. There is only ever going to be one NFL, really. But I think with wrestling, I think that, I don't know what I was going to say, really. That was it. With wrestling fans, internet wrestling fans, it's such a small part of people who enjoy wrestling. I think that's been one of the things that I've really enjoyed as being an independent wrestler, is just being around wrestling fans who just love all of it. They're just always there for it. You know, they're just always there for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, I've been at some wrestling shows where, you know, it's not been the greatest show. No one's fault. Sometimes people are new. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes there's productions issues. But the fans still show up to the next one. And I think, like, as a whole, like, people, you know, it's great to see that. And I think that's wrestling fans as a majority are like that. I think there's a very small vocal minority who like to complain because it's easy to get clout and it's easy to get engagement. And I think people like have that dopamine. They like to have that thing of, oh, you've just got 10 replies on Twitter because you said that someone's washed. I'm like, log off, go play a video game. Like, it's fine. Like, literally go do anything else. You are just farming for engagement. And obviously it doesn't help that sometimes they're monetized to farm for engagement. So, you know, there's something else to it there, but that's a topic for another podcast.
The nature of the modern world. It is what it
Yeah.
is. But at the end of the day, I think with independent wrestling fans, especially, that they are some very passionate individuals that they'll always go out and to buy their favorite independent wrestlers t-shirt, follow them on their socials, share all their stuff. Like, they are a passionate bunch. And obviously for yourself, Leon, I'd love to know the story of you deciding to actually enter into the UK independent wrestling scene.
Sure. So I started in 2019. So I started at quite a late age. I was like, I was very like out of shape and very kind of like, I never exercised. I never did anything really. I was just kind of like a nerd who, you know, didn't really leave the house. I was very anxious. I had a lot of like issues with depression, you know, I'm open to saying. And I didn't really do a lot of like work in the gym or anything like that. And then I think I got to a certain age and I was like, okay, I want to start working out a bit. And then I think as I got more and more into it, I started to kind of be like, actually, I could probably start wrestling. I could probably start doing this. So I think that's where I started really. And then I found out there was a place fairly close to where I lived at the time up north called, it was called WrestlePro at the time, went on to be called Pinfall. And Sam Bailey was doing the training there, and I just showed up one day. One of my friends who I knew from outside of wrestling recommended it, and I just showed up one day, and Sam was brilliant. And I trained there for about 6 months before COVID happened, and then COVID happened, and then it was kind of like obviously there's that. I moved on to a place called Evolution for a little bit, and then New Wave opened, and I moved over to New Wave just because I'd seen the work that Brendan was doing. I saw the way that he wrestled and I was like, that's exactly how I want to wrestle. Essentially, he had the big main event heavyweight style, and I was like, he had a similar body type to me, the way he carried himself. I was like, that's exactly what I want to be like. But to go back to your question, it was literally just like being, you know, finally taking that plunge and just being like, okay, let's do it. I'm so glad I did. And I think it did take me a long time, really longer than a lot of people, to kind of really realize who I am as a wrestler and what I want to do. But I'm, you know, really glad, you know, happy with where I am now.
That was absolutely, mate. Great to hear. And New Wave Academy, obviously, such a special place within, I think, wrestling here in the UK. Obviously, you've got the main one, which is led by Brendan. You have the Cardiff one with Mark Andrews, Split McPins. You have Midlands, I believe, where Wellbore, Mark Haskins do some of their stuff as well. And it's a fascinating place. Obviously, I've had many people who have been a part of New Wave, people that have traveled down from Scotland to go to New Wave. In the grand scheme of UK wrestling history, Leon, where do you think New Wave Academy will be a part of that?
I think we've probably started to just see where it is now, really, where you've got New Wave in Newport, which is, as you say, it's Brendan, and Wildboar's Newport as well as a lot of other people. And then Midlands is Flash Morgan Webster, Mark Haskins, and then over to Toronto now as well, with a bunch of different guys, Jody Threat, a bunch of different guys over there as well. And like you say, in Cardiff with Mark Andrews. And I think it just kind of sets the standard for British wrestling, because British wrestling has always had a really good heritage. It's always been really well regarded across the pond, everywhere. You know, you go in the world, really, British wrestling has always been one of those things that people herald as being very like high quality. And I think with New Wave there, and the way that there are several schools that under the banner, I think it just kind of holds it all to that quality, that if you go to one of these schools, you're going to be trained and developed in the best way in the UK. It kind of, like I say, it holds it to that standard. And I think that's what it is, really. It's kind of like, we're never really, you know, there's not a curriculum in wrestling. You can't really say to someone, this is the syllabus, this is what you should be taught. But I think having that there, almost like this franchise of New Wave Academies, you know, it creates this syllabus almost, because, you know, people are all kind of reading off the same hint sheet. All these guys like Mandrews and Boar and Brendan, Flash Morgan, and Jody Threat, all of these people have been trained by the same people, or I've trained at the same place, or I've worked in WWE, worked in TNA. They know how it should be done. The thing is with wrestling is anyone can open up a school, anyone can open up a company. And I think what this does, it sets a standard where if you go to one of these schools, you know that you're getting trained properly, you know you're given the right attitude, you're being given the right tools. And then it creates that network of shows as well. Pretty much everyone I know in South Wales who has been any kind of success has trained at New Wave. And I started to see that before I went there, really, is that, you know, this is where all the best wrestlers were being produced. and where they were going on to places like RevPro, places like Progress, all of these other big companies. And I think that because it creates that reputation again, it just, it becomes a brand in of itself, and it just becomes a mark of quality essentially.
Absolutely, you get that stamp of approval, and I may be a proud Scotsman, but I could happily say that the Welsh scene, I think, is probably one of the most on fire scenes within the UK, of just the amount of talent, what they produce, what they offer for wrestlers, what they offer for fans. It's special. It is truly special, and I love to know for yourself, Liam, why do you think it is that it's got such this well-regarded atmosphere, environment, and place for wrestlers? It's just the culture of the Welsh.
I think so, yeah. I think going back to a little bit what you were saying earlier about wrestling and the way it's kind of always been like the little man. It's always been kind of like the glow up. Really, it's that kind of thing of coming from nothing. And I think a lot of the guys from the Welsh scene, like the Flash Morgan Webster, Brendan White, Wild Boar, Danny Jones, a lot of these guys have known each other for a very long time, and they've really kind of come from absolutely nothing. Where attack wrestling was like, just a few people, and then what it grew into and what attack wrestling is known as now, it's this huge brand across, the pond. People are aware of attack wrestling, so they've been there at the start, and they just have this love of wrestling. They've been there from the times where there was just absolutely no money in it, when there was just no hope of ever being famous, when WWE would even ever look at the UK. And if they did ever look at the UK, it would be a specific set of people, probably in England. They were people in the Welsh valleys that had basically in their heads no hope they were ever going to get to WWE, but they were just doing it for the love of it. And that's why they're still there now. Like all of these guys who I mentioned earlier, all the coaches, all of the guys who are the vets, they still show up to the shows. They're not getting paid. But Brendan will come along, and I'll say to him like, "Oh, I'm at this show on the weekend. Do you want to come along and watch my match?" And he'll be like, "Absolutely." And he'll go out of his way and he'll drive up, and it is just that pure love of the business. Obviously everyone at the end of the day wants to make a living off of wrestling, but all of these guys would still do it for free. And I think that's the attitude that gets across, and that is the way that wrestling should be, really. Obviously I want everyone to make a living off of it, but at the same time, if you have the people there who would still do it if they had to do it for free, that's the love that comes across, and it comes across in the product, and it comes across in the real pride in the work. I think it's the real passion that these people aren't ever sitting on the laurels. They're not ever like going, this is good enough. It's like, no, I am training every single opportunity I get. I'm constantly improving my work. I'm constantly improving everything I can do, because I'm not finished. So I think it's that real love. That's what's come from the scene.
Absolutely, as well. And so many great opportunities as well, because obviously you can learn something through the physical aspect of it, but visual is just as important. And I know obviously there's great seminars that have happened down in the Welsh scene. Obviously, I know Mercedes, when they turned up randomly at New Waitrose, was like, "Oh, that's kind of crazy." Yeah, I know you had a wee seminar at Chaos with James Storm, I believe.
Yes, I did. Yeah. So funny story, actually. I actually picked up James Storm from the airport and took him to Wetherspoon's breakfast with a couple of other. Yeah, it was great, with a couple of other podcasters that I won't mention, but they had a few questions for him. But yeah, it was great. So James is a fantastic guy. He just absolute character in and out of the ring. I think just being around the scene has like let me meet some great people. Did the same thing with Scotty Too Hotty the year before for No Mercy Wrestling. Absolute great guy. I've met him a couple of times. The first time was in a Rumble. Second time picked him up again from a hotel in Bristol. Went to the show, did the show and everything, and then came back afterwards and went for KFC with Scotty Too Hotty. And I think you don't get those experiences. This is someone that I met. Someone that I saw on TV growing up. This is someone that I was probably going around very badly trying to do a worm at one point, and then all of a sudden he's sat in the front seat of my car, and I'm going, this is mad. This is absolutely brilliant. And I think you don't get experiences like that unless you're really, really just involved in it and just kind of holding your hand up and saying like, hey, I'll do this. And I think that's how I've got the most out of wrestling and gotten to where I am today. Just from just doing that, just taking those opportunities and just saying, yeah, absolutely, I'll do that. I'll do this seminar, I'll pick up this person, I'll do this. And then that's when you get those chats and some of the things I've learned from speaking to these guys, because obviously you get them sat in your car and then they're a captive audience and you can ask them anything you want. So, you just grill them, and it's great. No, but it's absolutely fantastic. And one of the things like I think I've loved about it is no one's been an arsehole. No one's been like horrible. Everyone has been great. Like everyone from like, you know, the top main event type guys that you'd think like, you know, both in British wrestling imports as well, everyone's been fantastic. And I'm just glad that that is just the way it is. It's just everyone is so pleasant to be around.
Yeah, that's really wholesome to see that you know, you get that reward and you get to share a bucket meal with Scotty Tahati. I mean, life can't be much better than that. You know, I'm going to probably throw out, this might be the weirdest question I've ever asked in the Soul Session. So this might be a first. I want to know, if you could take any wrestling legend to a Weatherspoons for breakfast, who would it be and why?
That is a good question. Oh God. Oh. See, now you've got me really thinking. In my head, I'm thinking something like, this is going to be a real left field one. I'm thinking something like Luke Gallows, just because I think it'd be really funny, because he's just such a big character. He's probably someone that I feel if you put him in a Weatherspoons breakfast, he's going to have a real something to say about it. Like, I sat there with James Storm, we had a Weatherspoons breakfast. He was brilliant. He thought it was great. We had a good time. We chatted about his acting. We chatted about wrestling, all of these things. And, you know, it's what you expect. But if you were going to say anyone ever, I would go, oh, who's going to be the best story to come out of this? Who's going to really make this fun? That is my first like, I don't know, if I wanted to make a funny story out of it, that would be my first guess. But realistically, I would probably say something like Triple H, just to pick his brain, really, just to kind of like see what's going on. What are they doing in terms of, you know, the company? What are they doing in terms of wrestling? You know, all of those types of things, really, because I think he's the man at the helm at the moment. And he's the guy that obviously I want to pick the brain of the most. But yeah, like there's probably some real left field options in there that I'll think about. I'm going to sit on that one, actually. I'll probably come back to you again. We'll be talking about something else, and I go, actually, there's someone else that I would like to have on this, just because I think it'd be really funny. And I think that to me is wrestling as well, because I think to be a wrestler, you've just got to be a bit nuts. Like you just have to be. Like, and I think that is what one of the things I love about wrestling is you just meet people who are just, and I mean this in the nicest way, absolutely bonkers. And I think you just have to be. And I try and like root myself a little bit, but that's probably why I'm not as successful as some people, is because I'm not the right type of nut. Whereas like some guys who I've met who are super successful are just crazy in the best possible way. And it's so enriching to be around, really. Because you just come out with some great stories and you just meet some great people.
I really want to see Luke Gallows and Weatherspoons now. I feel that's like prime being the elite material. I think that would just be absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
We've got to get that done. That'd be absolutely bonkers. But obviously as well for the Welsh scene, you know, it got that big highlight with obviously the inaugural Clash at the Castle event from WWE. AEW then brought over Dynamite and Collision taping. I know obviously WWE are coming back for a tour. They're doing a UK tour and they're going to be stopping in Cardiff. But do you feel like the time is now, with how hot the scene is, with everything's going on with like sort of New Wave, No Mercy, Attack, Chaos, that you guys are due another pay-per-view or premium live event?
Yeah, I think we're probably due again. I think with the way that people are really, really passionate about wrestling, and not just in Wales, but in the UK, I think we're due something. I think we are probably due. I think in my eyes, I feel like there's probably a full-time wrestling promotion at a corporate level that's probably could run out of the UK. But it's just kind of, you know, setting up that infrastructure. And I think, you know, not to speak too much on it, you know, because, you know, there's probably things going on that I'll be honest with you, I don't have any knowledge of, so I'm not speaking of anyway, but like, you know, not to make anyone think that I do. But there's, you know, I think in an ideal world, you know, I'd love there to be a full time job for every wrestler in the UK. And I think like when things like pay-per-views happen from places like AEW and WWE, I think it provides a lot of job opportunities, and it provides a lot of people opportunities to not just earn a one-off, but also put their face in front of people. Because sometimes it's not about just, and I think I alluded to this earlier, sometimes it's not like just having that body of work. Sometimes it's about speaking to the right people, kind of showing that you're trustworthy, showing that you're someone that can be like, you know, just put out there, really. Essentially, so a lot of the other things that they're looking for that isn't necessarily just being able to wrestle.
Absolutely, and you know, it gives great opportunities for people in the independent level to get that showcase, even work, you know, the old security gig because everyone has that ability within wrestling, and it's just a true joy to see. But going back to yourself, obviously, I know you have a great journey, but there was a bit of a derailment due to an illness. And if you feel comfortable, just explain how that affected you and your journey.
Yeah, sure. So it was kind of like middle of last year. I did a match for VCW actually. I was teaming with Leon Cage, fantastic wrestler, who's really, really on the up at the moment, against Adam Crater and James Ellis. And I felt fine on the day, and then just the day after, I just felt so tired, more so than you would do normally after a wrestling match, because yeah, obviously you feel tired the day after, you're hurting and everything. But I was like, started having heart palpitations, a lot of really weird stuff. I went to training on the Wednesday, and I was just doing very basic kind of tech wrestling. And I just felt very like, oh God, like there's something really weird wrong with me. And then I said to Brandon, who was the coach, and I just said, I'm really sorry, I'm just going to have to go and get myself checked out, essentially. And they said I had some kind of virus. They're not too sure exactly what it was, possibly COVID, maybe something adjacent. And I just kept getting like, they weren't too sure whether it was like a mini heart attack, and that very much concerned me at the time. But it was like something that, it was basically some kind of like inflammation in my heart. I forgot the actual term for it, but I had some inflammation. And I think I had to take probably only around a month or so out fully. But it was a while afterwards, and probably up until probably only about 2 months ago, where I was still struggling from a cardio perspective. And I think probably what it did is kind of, when I was away for that little while, made me kind of really appreciate everything. It make you appreciate every minute that you have, make you appreciate everything that, like, I know some guys are out for, like I just mentioned, Leon Cage is unfortunately out with an injury at the moment, and he's probably going to be out for a lot longer than I was. But I think just having that brief time away from it, because when you're in wrestling, you're just so in it. Like every single day you're doing something related to it. You're either at the gym, or you're going to training, or you're at a show, or you wrestling on a show, or you're helping out, you're doing all of these things related to it. But when you're forcefully taken away from it because you're basically bedridden, you kind of go, oh God, is this what I want to do? And the resounding answer was yes. And then all of a sudden, all of this disillusion you might have with it, all of this kind of feeling you might have that, all the negative feelings, they just start to peel away, because you start to miss it, and you start to miss the people and the shows and just everything, So yeah, it made me so appreciative for what I had done. And then everything started to come together after that, where I started to get a lot more opportunities. I'm nowhere near where I want to be as of yet, but I've started to be a place now where I'm booked more or less every weekend, and I think that's a fantastic place to be in.
Right, great to hear from you, man. That you had that little scare, but you're good now. You're getting more great opportunities. That's really amazing to see, man. Obviously, the UK, it's big. It's a very big place. And from your insight and your looking at the scene, has there anywhere that's particularly caught your interest, where you want to go and explore or develop your skills?
I think I've managed to kind of get my foot in the door in a lot of places that I really wanted to be in. I think Chaos was a big one for me. I managed to make my debut there in January. Just one of the best independent companies across the UK. I think they're just absolutely fantastic. And I'm based in Bristol now, after moving here like just before the pandemic, and it's always been the one for me that I knew that Chaos is the big one, and Attack as well, obviously as well. And I think with them running shows in Bristol as well, I want to be involved in that. But outside of the Welsh scene, outside of the Southwest scene, without being too obvious, Rev Pro, Progress, obviously they're the places to be. But in terms of up north, I trained with a lot of guys from Future Shock. I'd love to go back there, and go back to Future Shock, go to a lot of places up north. I know there's a lot more companies that have opened up near where I live now. Like I lived in Bolton for a long time. There's now a place that is it's Bolton Town Wrestling. I think that's fantastic. Like a lot of smaller companies have started to open up now, where guys have gone, like, it might be a lot of the same people, but there's like different storylines going on. There's slightly different audiences. There's slightly different types of things that we're doing in terms of making the feeling different. Some guys might be baby faces here, sometimes might be heels here, and it just creates more places for guys to work and more places for fans to go, because you will get the fans that will go to all of the shows, but you will also get fans where it's like, actually, we've just got this show this weekend because we can only really go down the road. And I think giving fans more opportunities and working more opportunities is great. So to answer your question, everywhere, honestly. I want to be everywhere because I love wrestling. I love getting to meet people. And some of the best matches that I've had have been the ones where I've never really seen the guy or spoke to them, like, and it's just been a very much kind of a nice to meet you, let's put something together and go out. And I think you get that a lot as well when you travel. So yeah, everywhere.
Like, the world's your oyster. You can travel up and down this country anywhere you can, as long as not by train, because the trains suck. Yes, they do.
I think that is a part of what makes the wrestling so good here. So I have a lot of Americans ask me, like when Scott Too Hotty came over, he was like, "Why is the wrestling so good here?" And I'm like, "It's because everywhere is just at worst a 4-hour drive away, and it's amazing how long of a drive people will do for wrestling." I did on Saturday, half an hour drive into Newport, and then I got into someone else's car, and then we're in the car for 2.5 hours to wrestle at a festival for New Wave. In front of kids, and we did the most basic family-friendly match, but I still did it because I love wrestling. I love getting those opportunities. And how often do you get to say I went and, you know, wrestled at a family festival in a field in the middle of Wales, you know? So it's amazing what people will do for wrestling. So having that, the condensed country where anyone can travel up and down, you can see the best trainers at just a 2-hour drive away. People will do it, whereas in America and a lot of other places, it's a 3-hour, 4-hour drive just to get to a wrestling show. Whereas here, because everything is just so densely packed in, the talent just learns from each other. The cream rises to the crop, as Macho Man would say. It just makes everything just so competitive, but at the same time so collaborative. And I really, really enjoy that.
Yeah, absolutely. It really does show the joys of this scene and the connectivity of it. Now, obviously, as well, something we have to bring up as well while I do my due diligence with research. Situation going on with VCW. Obviously, who's been on the show before, Aaron Blanchard, with the championship. For folks who may not be aware, what is this whole situation going on?
So VCW's part of No Mercy Wrestling, as you may or may not know. VCW used to be its own thing called Valley's Championship Wrestling. And as a part of No Mercy buying out VCW, they control it and own it, etc., which is normally owned by a gentleman called Chris Bevan. Chris Bevan, unfortunately, lost the rights to No Mercy and therefore VCW to James Ellis. And James Ellis's right-hand man is a man called Aaron Blanchard. So as a part of what's going on at VCW, Aaron Blanchard has been putting himself into situations in which I'd say he's not deserved, including cheating his way into winning the VCW championship. So as I don't know what I'm going to say, a righteous man, if you want to put it that way, a man of like, you know, I like seeing people earn stuff. I'd say Aaron's not earned his chance to be the VCW champion. So, yeah, not very happy the way he's conducted himself, not very happy the way he's cheated my fellow wrestlers that I have a lot of respect for out of championships. And the past VCW show, I faced MJ Grayson in one of my favorite matches so far, just a great guy to work with. Aaron cheated me out of that match, inserted me into the Rumble at number 1, and I had to go all the way from 1 to the end to win, which I did do. And the idea was supposed to be that I was going to win the Outbreak Championship, which is a championship from a company called Pro Wrestling Carnage that they're bringing back. But he unfortunately cheated me out of that again. So I will be facing Josh Holly in Ringland on June the 29th for VCW. Which is going to be a great match. In reality, Josh is a fantastic wrestler. He's one of the best on the Welsh scene. He's someone that I wanted to wrestle for a while. I wrestled him in a practice match a while back, and I just wasn't ready for it. And he just completely showed me the gap in the skill of where I was and where I wanted to be. And I feel like I'm a lot closer to where I want to be now. So hopefully that'll show. And I think we'll have a great match. And I think being a part of VCW has been great. It's somewhere that I literally was, and I think all of the opportunities I've had, and I alluded to this earlier, have been me showing up at places and just saying like, hey, this is me. This is some of the work I've done. I would love to work for you guys. If there's anything you need, let me know. So I've done everything from crewing to carrying people's jackets, to putting up the ring, to, you know, you name it, you know, ferrying people in cars, all sorts of stuff, anything and everything, merch, everything, you know, just because I want to be a part of wrestling, not just because I want to be on the show, but like, if you give me an opportunity, yeah, absolutely, I'll be there for it. But, you know, just be there is good enough sometimes. But because of that, and because of how I've been, it kind of crept up on me that there's a few places that kind of went, actually, you've shown you're really reliable. You've shown that you're really someone that we can, you know, and you're someone that is, you know, coming along as a wrestler. So we're going to give you these opportunities. And I think the two things go hand in hand, really. So, yeah, I'm very proud of how I've got these opportunities, really, because I feel like I've worked very hard for them. But at the same time, you know, I want to show that I've earned it. I want to show that I deserve to be here. So, yeah.
Hey, you've earned it, and you know you may have been cheated out by Blanchard. You know he's an interesting guy. He's been on this show and he's talked his talk and he's walked his walk. I mean, I hear what he said, but you know
He likes to do a lot of that. Yeah.
he does like to go on. You know, he gives me plenty of time to chat. I ain't gonna put down the gauntlet. I ain't gonna say anything bad. I respect all the guests, but you know, I like to give guests platforms and opportunities to say things. You know, so if Blanchard is watching Leon, is there anything you'd like to say to the current champion of VCW?
What I want to say to the current champion of VCW, Aaron Blanchard, is your days are numbered. You will be the VCW champion for a numbered amount of days, at which point I or someone else will take that championship away from you. Hopefully it will be me. If it is not me, then I'm sure that the next person who's champion will be a better champion than you, just because they're not you. Aaron Blanchard, you've cheated your way to that championship. You have cheated your way to every single opportunity that you've had just by being messmates with James Ellis. But that will only last for so long. I said it at the show, and I'll say it here. VCW isn't Blanch. VCW isn't James Ellis. It's not Brilliance. VCW is the people of the valleys. The fans are what make professional wrestling, and the fans will only put up with you for so long. And I and everyone else who's a wrestler will only put up with you for so long. And that time is very much coming to a close. So watch this space.
And I'm just gonna run in the corner and be like, I've just caused all this. Let's just watch from the corners and be like, carnage.
Yeah, absolutely. He caught a Uranagi off me on the last show. He tried to hit me with a belt after I'd won the Rumble, and he caught a Uranagi off me. I grabbed him by the throat, and it was very exhilarating. And all the fans there loved it. It was great. So a very, very proud moment. Just not even just that, but that entire show. It was great. Loved it so much.
Great to hear, my brother. And I can't wait to see what happens in the future for yourself and the VCW company and the championship and everything that goes on within it. You know, Leon, you've been a great guest here for the Soul Sessions, and we're going to be wrapping up our time here because my pint is getting empty and I need to replace the beer machine because I do that all the time. So final question, my friend, to talk about the identity of British wrestlers. Obviously, there's that strong style. There is that essence of being a British wrestler. You've done it all. You've worked a family show. You worked a teenage show. You worked an adult show. And we've seen the type of talent we create. Obviously, the great people who were in NXT UK, now leading New Wave and Chaos and Attack and all these other promotions. To the people in WWE like Drew McIntyre and Nikki ASH. And obviously in AEW with the likes of Ospreay and all these other great talents. What is it about particularly the United Kingdom when it comes to wrestling that creates these phenomenal talent?
I think, again, kind of what I was talking about earlier about the kind of like collaborative effort and kind of like letting those people work together and bringing the best out of people, and that competitiveness where people are always striving for the best, you know, because it is such a dense pool of talent. Those people are always rising up. And I think that we've got such a heritage to hold ourselves to. I think if you were to say to an American person, what's a British wrestler? As you say, it's got those connotations of someone that is hard hitting. It's got those connotations of someone that is a good technical wrestler, someone that has got a lot of background in like almost like catch wrestling and all of those things as well. You know, people like Billy Robinson. A lot of prestige and history comes within British wrestling. I think we hold ourselves to that. Whereas like someone like myself, you know, I'm not a technical wrestler by any means, but at the same time, I'm probably I've got stuff in I've got stuff in my back pocket that a lot of Americans wouldn't even think about, because it's, you know, I want to have that there. I want to hold myself to a standard that if someone was to start technical wrestling with me, at least as a British wrestler, I know what I'm doing. So there's a lot of things that we hold ourselves to that American wrestlers or like wrestlers outside of the UK might not necessarily do. But I think that's an attitude that's very, very much just like in the coaching that we're given as well. Like when I'm getting coaching sessions from people like Brandon or Hitch or whoever, there's a wild range of styles that go into it. We're trying to be made into fully rounded wrestlers. And I think that's what brings the best out of us. And again, what I kind of alluded to earlier, there's just that real appetite of like, I don't know if we're ever going to make this. There's probably less of a chance that someone from the UK is going to be seen from someone from the US. So we're just doing this out of the pure love of it. And that's why we're keeping going. That's why we've got that determination. And I think that's what brings it out of us, really, that, you know, we know that, you know, the chances of making it are very small, but we'll still do it anyway because we just love this so much.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Leon. I think what you've really said there is just absolute true glory, glory, glory. But you know what, folks? Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Soul Session. Of course, if you love what you've heard from Leon, I will put a link to his Instagram down below. You can click it, follow him, see his journey. He's got some merch there. Grab yourself a couple of t-shirts. Come on, wrestling fans. You can't wear the one shirt all the time. There is a thing called a washing machine. Please use it. But as I do as a Scotsman, as I finish up your pints, folks. And put your chairs away. And thank you as always for tuning in for another episode of the Soul Sessions.
Thank you.
Now I'm out there, gonna live like animals do.